The Eutypa Dieback is caused by fungus, which spreads through spores of the fungus. So the spores can infect pruning wounds, generally freshly cut pruning wounds for the first few weeks of the wounds being made. The spores will enter through into the vine, the spores germinate and then they grow through the wood, killing the wood as they progress. So once the wood dies, the fungus then goes into a survival mode and it starts to produce fruiting bodies which on rainfall or any sort of wetting of the wood, those spores are then produced again and then can reinfect new pruning wounds. And this is a cycle that happens generally throughout a year. So spore release occurs during rainfall and it requires about equivalent of 2 mils of rainfall or irrigation. The spores will start to be released within 2 hours and then they'll continue to be released throughout a rain period and then for another maybe 36 hours after the rain has stopped. So your window of infection is from the point of where the rain starts to about a day or two after the rain event has ended.
Fortunately for managing Eutypa, it's really quite an easy process in the sense that it's an infection that then spreads through the vine, and if you can cut back to where you actually see the infection and actually cut back, you can actually see a shape that's quite particular. Once you find that you've got into clean wood, then perhaps cut another 10 centimetres further in to be sure that you've got rid of it, and then of course paint that cut so that you don't get a fresh infection. And provided you don't get that fresh infection, you can start again with a clean root system, which is fantastic. It is costly and it does take time. Obviously the first year you've actually got virtually no crop, the second year probably about a half crop, and the third year a full crop. The decision was made to actually top work this vineyard over a period of 4 years, so that at any stage you at least had some mature vines still functioning. And that has worked extremely well. Yes, it's time consuming, but the end product is that you've got a vine that's revitalised and you're back into full production.
So here we can see healthy canopy growth. It's mid-October, so these have been growing 3 to 4 weeks. The bunches are out and not ready at flowering, so that's just to show where we're at. The vine next door is really heavily symptomatic, dead cordon, and the leaves that are growing, the shoots are stunted, the leaves are small and cupped. The bunches are full size, but they're not going to yield anything. They will abort before it gets to harvest. So we've got a clear half a vine here that's just not productive at all. And these stunted shoots are really what you're looking for. It's very obvious here because this infection's quite established. When you're looking for these small shoots in a younger vineyard, they're a lot harder to spot, so earlier in the season, the better.
We're doing remedial surgery, so cutting off the trunk and promoting the growth of water shoots from the base of the vine. And then coming through in the following year, once those canes have lignified, training those up to the wire and basically creating a new vine. So there is a lot of work involved in it, in the actual cutting out and the removal of all the material and burning it off. So you remove the spore load from the vineyard and all the fruiting structures. And then once you've done that, you're training a young vineyard.
We're looking at using advantageous water shoots that are coming off the trunks of the vines and stringing them up in the year before we cut the tops off. This is only in theory and hasn't been practiced yet, so it's just a new idea that's come out of the rework that we've already started to do, and we think that we may be able to get a new trunk established before we actually take the tops off, and then we can re-establish the cord on the same year. It'll give us a 12-month lass out of production and more definitive and more definite coming back into production within 12 months.
Here we are in a vineyard that is nearly 100 years old, Shiraz, that is a component of the Dead Arm, the wine that we make, named after the Eutypa fungus that gets into the pruning cuts and gradually kills off parts of the arms of the vine. And you can see this vine has a nice little growing part here, and then Eutypa here, and this side's already died off. It's also got a growing point here of a sucker. So this is actually about every 20 years we go through and remove all the dead arms out of the vineyard and retrain up new shoots. And so we could either cut this one off here and leave this all alive and whatever, but there's a good chance that Eutypa is already back in here. So we'll probably cut it off down here and just leave this shoot to become the new vine, and we're going to do that next year in this vineyard so that we can keep the vines alive for hundreds of years by doing it this way. So This is a vine that we've actually only recently cut all the dead arms off, and you can see it's been painted here with some paint. When we cut it off, we used a compound called Pathex to sterilise the snips or the saw, whichever one we use. This one's a saw, and then cut it and then immediately paint it straight away to stop the Eutypa getting into the fresh wound. And so now you can see the vine's shot up through here, and we've trained it right up, and it's healthy and back to a normal vine where really only half of the vine would have been alive at one stage there back a few years ago.
I guess we got to the point with our own vineyards here where yields were declining to the point where we realised we needed to do something about it. Initially we started with just chopping off arms, doing the normal sort of painting and reworking that was recommended at the time, but we found that it wasn't solving the problem. We weren't getting on top of it, so we looked at the more drastic approach of chainsawing the vines and retraining. We started that process back in 2012, and we just started with a couple of rows. It was a really successful process. We got great water shoots. We had no problems getting the vines back up to the wire. So we expanded that trial in 2013, and then in 2014 we said, yes, this is the direction we're heading. The block that I have here on my right was chainsawed in August 2014. We've already managed to get those vines up to the wire and well established. The cordon's fully established with about 30 to 40 bunches per vine this year already. Any misses that we do have, and the misses are very few, will be filled up with layers, and we've managed to get those layers established this year. By next year they'll be in the ground, and it looks like the whole block will be up and running. So we're really happy with the way it's worked, and we're certainly encouraging our growers to get on board, and a number of our growers have already adopted this process and are taking it ahead.
Eutypa is something that we're definitely going to have to learn to live with in the viticulture industry, just as the stone fruit industry have had to live with as well. So it's something just about ongoing management and just constantly reiterating those practices of remedial surgery, and just doing something before it gets too late, because we've got all these great old vineyards in Australia, and if we don't do something about this disease, then we're going to just lose all that clonal material and lose all the historical background of all our viticultural history. So something really important for young vineyards, for mid-age vineyards, for old vineyards, and for anyone working in the wine industry. If you want to grow quality fruit and uniform fruit within a vineyard, Eutypa is something you really need to take seriously.
So going forward then, the future with managing Eutypa Dieback, it's really important that if we instill the management, the protection of pruning wounds annually in our vines, we will eventually bring down the level of inoculum that's in the environment, and there is a really positive direction which we're taking towards the management of the disease. And in the future, we don't expect to see anywhere near the incidence of disease that we're seeing now, as long as the industry does take up proactive management of the disease.